Hello everyone, it's Masuma Mishu here. Do you want to publish a journal article from your research? It might be MSc dissertation or PhD thesis or from your further research. Then this video is for you. Today I am going to discuss step-by-step process of writing a journal article and how to publish it to a journal. By the way, I'm Masuma Mishu and I'm a lecturer in public health at University College London, and I'm also a public health researcher working in this field for more than 16 years. Today I'm going to discuss, I'm going to share my personal experience of publishing the first journal article from my PhD thesis. So it was quite a special journey for me personally, and also a quite steep learning curve to understand the process, step-by-step process of how to publish a journal article in an international journal. The topic of my PhD thesis was on dental caries and anthropometric measures in a sample of 5 to 9-year-old children in Dhaka, Bangladesh. So I created another video. If you're interested, you can watch that video where I shared my experience of data collection, conducting this cross-sectional survey. And following that one, I completed my writing of my thesis, submitted it, and then I started preparing the manuscript from my first research objective. By the way, from my PhD thesis, I managed to publish 3 articles, and this is the first one based on my first research question or my main study aim. Before publishing your journal article, you need to first prepare your manuscript, and for that you need to follow the step-by-step process of preparing the manuscript based on the journal's requirement. For example, for this article, I published it in Community Dentistry and Oral Epidemiology journal. So I went to the journal's homepage, and in each journal's homepage there is a tab called Author's Guideline, where you can find the detailed instruction of how you should prepare your manuscript that would be appropriate to publish in that journal. So I edited my manuscript based on the guidelines of that specific journal. In the first part for this journal, I need to create one structured abstract. This is a common form for any kind of published journal article, is that you need to prepare an abstract which is the summary of overall your study. It could be structured abstract or unstructured. So in this case it was a structured abstract where I summarized my main study aim, the methods, results, and the conclusion, and some keyword for this study. And you need to also decide who are going to be the co-authors of your article. In this case, they are my PhD supervisors, so they were the co-author of my article. And as you see in the study aim, I have briefly mentioned the overall study aim. Main study aim was to assess the association of dental caries and anthropometric measures in the study sample. In methods, I briefly discussed that a cross-sectional observational study I conducted, from where, and 3 main things I have to report. Usually it's need to be reported was our main outcome variable, what are the main exposures, or what's the main exposure if it's one, and then the confounders, and also you can say it as the potential covariates that you adjusted in your analysis. And then in the results section, definitely you can't be able to report everything. You need to summarize the main key findings to report in the abstract, and then you need to write the conclusion section. By the way, there is very strict word limitations. Based on journal to journal, it might vary, but for abstract you will get very strict word count, and you need to write your abstract within those word count. You can't exceed the word count. Then after the abstract section, it comes about the first part, that's introduction. In some journals it could be background section. So here you need to write, first of all, in the first paragraph of your introduction section is to set up the scene, why this is a public health problem, what's the major thing about this condition, why this is need to be addressed. So you need to create the bigger picture and set the scene of your study. Then in your background section, you need to discuss what are the evidences out there about the research question that you have, and these should lead to the gap in evidence, like what need to be addressed further, so that you are conducting to address that gap and conducting this study, what your study will contribute. So your background sections should end with a gap in evidence, and then it should lead to your study aim. For example, in my case, I mentioned that definitely there are less number of studies in lower middle income countries setting assessing the dental caries, and this association of dental caries and height, weight, BMI varies across different countries. In high income countries, the association is different, is positive kind of association. In low middle income countries setting, the association is again different, and some studies didn't identify any evidence of association. So there is an inconsistency in the findings. That's why I conducted these studies, and that I narrated that gap. And to address that gap, I mentioned that my main study aim is to assess this association, adjusting for different variables. Then the next section is on method section. So in the method section, you are going to discuss what kind of study you conducted. In this case, as I was going to assess the association, so a cross-sectional or observational study was enough to answer this research question. However, if you want to address different kind of research question, you might need to consider the other kind of study designs, for example, longitudinal study or interventional study. However, that will be beyond the remit of discussion in today's video. I might create another video for discussing different kind of study design, but for this study, as I conducted the cross-sectional observational study, I reported it. I also reported the important details of conducting the study, getting the ethics approval, what questionnaire I used, what were the variables that I used, why I choose those variables, what data analysis method I used, and what are the variables that I adjusted or considered in my analysis. For example, in this case, for this study, first I discussed the results in a descriptive table. Then I did some bivariate association, where I just tested the main outcome variables, which were height, weight, and BMI of children, and the exposure, that was the dental caries and PUFA, that's pulpal involvement, ulceration, fistula, and abscess. So the study outcome and the exposure, I want to test it, the association, that's the bivariate association. Later, at the advanced stage, I conducted the multivariate linear regression, where I can assess the main outcome and the exposure, but I also adjusted it for other different confounding factors. For example, here it was the age, sex, socioeconomic condition, maternal education, their birth weight, any childhood long-term diseases. So these are the confounding factors that I adjusted in my analysis, so that in the results section, I can say that even after adjusting for these confounding factors, if I still get any association of my main exposure and the outcome. So let's see the next part, that's the results section. In the results section, it might depends on the journal's requirement. You sometimes might need to submit your tables in a separate document and main manuscript in a separate document, but in the main manuscript you will indicate where you want your first table, second table to be. So here this was the first table of my study in the results section. So the first table is usually the description of the outcome variable and covariates and the study population. The first table is usually the descriptive kind of table where you present your study population, how this population were. And then in the results section, I presented this figure which showed the bivariate association of main outcome and the exposures. And also in the third table, this table, I presented the association between height, weight and BMI. By the way, I converted this score into the Z score, and the association was adjusted for other confounding factors, as I was explaining before. So this is the main result table in my article. So when I wrote this results section, again there are pretty straightforward steps everyone need to follow. The first part of the results section is usually the description of your study population. The numbers comes from your first descriptive table. Later you will go into detail about the results of your main analysis, final analysis. And by the way, you don't need to report everything that you have presented in your table in the results section. In the results section, that's the main highlighted thing that you want to write in the paragraph, and you can always refer to the main table that you can say that the further details could be found in this table. And in your text, you have to refer the table or the figure. Then the next part is writing the discussion section, which is sometimes a bit tricky to write. In the discussion section, the first paragraph is on summarizing your main study findings, the main one. And then the next 1 or 2 paragraph is comparing and contrasting your study finding to other study similar or different kind of study findings. And you also need to bring your critical analysis in this section, right, when writing the discussion part, the similarity or differences you are finding with other studies, why you might find that study, what might be the limitations of other studies. So those discussions should come here in the discussion section. And for some studies, you might also need to discuss the underlying mechanism. So that's the discussion section, and discussion section should lead to the strength and limitations of your study and the contribution that you are making. You should highlight what are the strengths and limitations of your study, and you will also make some recommendations for further study recommendation, further research recommendation based on the findings of your study. And finally, you need to write the conclusion of your article. Then the list of references. Another important thing, you need to edit the references based on the journal's required referencing style. There are several different styles, as you know, but make sure that you follow the journal's recommended referencing style for preparing your manuscript. So when you will write the manuscript based on the journal's required style, you are ready to submit it, and make sure you prepared one cover page which will explain why you think this article is suitable for that journal, and you can find related information in the journal's homepage. What are the main points that the journal want to publish, what are their importance of publishing the articles, and you can also read some of their recently published articles so that you will understand how you should format your manuscript to submit to that journal. You need to follow the step-by-step process of online submission and make sure that all of your co-authors knows about this. They reviewed the final manuscript, they gave consent to publish it, and then you can proceed for publishing. So after submitting the article to a journal, it usually goes for the desk review, and if it's not rejected at desk level, then it goes for peer reviewing process. Usually it depends on 2 to 5 or more peer reviewer will review your manuscript, and usually they come back with some suggestions or recommended changes. After getting those suggestions, peer reviewer comments, you need to address those comments and create one document of how you address those comments point by point, and then make changes of your manuscript and submit a track changed version or a version which highlighted all the changes that you have made from the previous submission, and one clear version. And hopefully, if you're lucky, your paper will be accepted. Again, go with the peer reviewing process, and if peer reviewers are happy, then it will be published. So in my case, for this paper, I got one round of peer reviewer comments, and after addressing those comments, the paper was published. But in some cases, I have experienced where after addressing the peer reviewer comments, they came up again with some further suggestions, and I need to made again the changes according to the peer reviewers' comments. It's quite a long process. It's not a very straightforward overnight process that you'll be able to publish in an international peer-reviewed journal. So yeah, for me it took almost 7 months to publish this article from initial submission. So yeah, finally when you will see that after all this hard work, your paper has been published, that's really very fulfilling to you, and you'll feel very happy after seeing your published journal article. So that's the story of publishing my first journal article from my PhD thesis. Hope you find this process, my experience, helpful, and you will be interested to publish your article as well. If you have any related question, please feel free to drop it in the comment section. I'll try to reply to you. That's all for today. Thank you. Bye.